very warm welcome. You're watching News 18 Global. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, war has returned to Gaza after the short truce ended, with both sides accusing the other of not staying true to their words. But this time, there's nowhere for Palestinians to hide. After 2 months of intense Israeli offensive in northern Gaza, the enclave is now reduced to rubble, with Palestinians now cramming into southern Gaza. Israeli Defense Force has now shifted its focus to south of Gaza. The IDF has once again dropped leaflets to warn citizens to evacuate immediately. Amid airstrikes and panic of evacuations, a new humanitarian crisis is also brewing within southern Gaza. As of now, there are no signs of Israel returning to the truce table. The country believes that Hamas leaders that fled from northern Gaza are now hiding in the south. With Israeli forces pushing into Gaza's south, the US has also urged Israel to protect civilian lives amid its offensive, whatever the assurances may be. With the airstrikes intensifying and casualties mounting further, the world is watching in fear if south of Gaza will soon witness the horrors of northern Gaza. We bring you reactions from the United States. To begin with, here's what the US NSA Jake Sullivan has to say.
What Israel has done is it said, this is the area where we are going to conduct ground maneuver. Please, everybody move out of this area so that you're not going to be caught in the crossfire. They have also indicated that there are areas where there will be no strike zones. And in those zones, we do expect Israel to follow through on not striking.
It's too early to make a definitive assessment. The Secretary was very clear about how we want to judge this based on results, not based on intent. We've seen a much more targeted request for evacuations here, where the Israeli Defense Forces have identified specific neighborhoods where they plan to conduct military operations and urged in advance of those operations the people in those neighborhoods to move, rather than telling an entire city or an entire region to vacate their homes. So that is an improvement on what's happened before. We think far too many people, I have not seen evidence that they are intentionally killing civilians. We believe that far too many civilians have been killed. But again, this goes back to the underlying problem of this entire situation, which is that Hamas has embedded itself inside civilians, inside civilian homes, inside mosques, in schools, in churches.
Desperate residents of Khan Younis flee on foot, carrying what they can of their belongings. On Monday, Israel ordered people out of swathes of the main southern city in the Gaza Strip. As they left, bombs fell on areas still described as safe. Many are being displaced for a second or third time since the war broke out on October 7th. Hamdi Zahir from northern Gaza says he sheltered for a month in the Ashifa hospital, then was ordered south to the safe areas they're now being told to evacuate. Send us to the grave and be done with it, he says. Some 80% of Gaza's 2.3 million people have now been made homeless, in an Israeli bombing campaign that has reduced much of the crowded coastal strip to a desolate wasteland. Israeli forces largely captured the northern half of Gaza in November. Since a week-long truce collapsed on Friday, they have pushed deep into the southern half. This house in Khan Younis was struck overnight. Nisreen Abdulmoti lives next door with her daughter and 2-year-old baby.
They told us to move from the north to Khan Younis since the south is safer. And now they've bombed Khan Younis. Even Khan Younis is not safe now. And even if we move to Rafah, Rafah is not safe either. Where do they want us to go?
The parts of Khan Younis people were ordered to leave were home to more than 350,000 people before the war, the UN says, not counting the hundreds of thousands who crowded in to take shelter from the bombs. Medical officials in the enclave say Israel's bombing has killed more than 15,500 people, with thousands more missing and feared buried under the rubble. Israel launched its assault to annihilate Hamas in retaliation for the October 7th attack by its gunmen, who killed 1,200 people and seized 240 hostages, according to Israeli tallies.
But that's not all. On Monday, some 800 people, including women's activists and diplomats, gathered at UN headquarters in New York. They were representing about 40 countries. What followed was a presentation laying out the evidence of large-scale sexual violence and testimonies from witnesses. That included Shari Mendes, a member of an Israeli military reserve unit. He was tasked with preparing the bodies of fallen female soldiers for burial. Mendes said his team found several, and I quote, who were shot in the crotch, intimate parts, vagina, or were even shot in their breast. Others had mutilated faces or multiple gunshots to their heads. And here's the account of Simcha Grainman, a volunteer who helped collect the remains of these victims. Grainman says that the body of one woman had, and I quote, nails and different objects in her female organs. In another house, a person's genitals were so mutilated that we couldn't identify if it was a man or a woman. This is the horror of October 7, perpetrated by Hamas. Yet those atrocities have received little scrutiny from human rights groups amid the war between Israel and Hamas. And it was only days ago that UN Women, the United Nations Women's Rights Agency, specifically condemned the sexual violence against women. Ironically, UN Women have regularly spoken out about the plight of Palestinian women and girls. And now, Israelis and several Jews around the world say that they feel abandoned by an international social justice community. And that includes women's groups, human rights groups, liberal celebrities, among others, whose causes they have supported in crises around the world. I bring you reactions.
On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated rape and sexual violence, exploiting these unforgivable crimes as weapons of war. These were not merely sick, spur-of-the-moment decisions to defile and mutilate Israeli women and girls, to parade their naked bodies in the street while onlookers cheered. This was premeditated. This was planned. This was instructed.
As a global community, we must respond to weaponized sexual violence wherever it happens with absolute condemnation. There can be no justifications and no excuses. Rape as a weapon of war is a crime against humanity.
This moment is so critical. We have come so far in establishing that rape is a crime against humanity, and we have come so far in believing survivors of sexual assault in so many situations. That's why the silence on these war crimes is dangerous. It threatens to undo decades of progress, to undo an entire movement.